The National Alliance of Independent Schools Association says it's ready to reopen school. The association represents private schools and is waiting the conclusion of a meeting between the Basic Education Minister and various other stakeholders. We're joined by Ebrahim Ansur, who is from the National Alliance of Independent Schools Association. Ebrahim, good evening and thank you for your time on News at Prime tonight. Firstly, when you talk about readiness to go to school, are you saying that given the opportunity, you would resume schooling as early as tomorrow, or that you have already started with schooling?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good evening to your viewers. Firstly, let me contextualize what we have said. Firstly, the National Alliance of Independent Schools Association has never said that we are ready to start school tomorrow. We have been in negotiation with the Director General and the Department of Basic Education officials since the 21st of April. We have made several submissions, but I think it is important for your viewers to understand that we represent over 1,400 schools, and in a sense, the independent schools that we represent are a microcosm of the state system. Just as you may have state schools, for example, the previously advantaged Model C schools, which might be in a position to start as soon as possible, so too we have independent schools that are in that position. However, there are a large number of independent schools that are in no position to start unless they have all the necessary systems in place and the equipment and the PPEs, etc., etc. So I just want to please make it quite clear that we are not starting school tomorrow. We are working in good faith with the Department of Basic Education and the Minister of Basic Education, and we are awaiting an announcement from the Minister on the date that she and the National Command Council feel is safe for children to go back to schools. I must emphasize that safety of our children is our priority. Having said that, we have obviously taken note of all the requirements, the regulations, the health requirements, etc., that we have been provided with. And yes, there are a number of schools that are in a position to comply with all of these, and they will start if they are given the go-ahead. But this is not going to be a unilateral decision. The decision will rest on the outcome of what the Minister of Education announces, and we obviously will wait patiently for that announcement. I hope that clears our position.
Sure. Ebrahim, when you take a look at the statement that was issued by the Basic Education Department, they seem to say that there are in fact some private schools who have been making plans to operate on the sly, despite what the state has said about the resumption of schooling so far. So, as far as you know, have any of your members started school? Have they reopened in breach of government's regulations?
Again, one has to understand the independent school sector. We have 9 associations. Many of them are faith-based associations. We meet regularly. In fact, we met only this week. And we had made it absolutely clear that none of the schools that belong, none of the 1,400 plus schools that belong to NAISA will start unless NAISA gives the go-ahead. However, there are a number of so-called fly-by-night independent schools that operate under the radar. It's possible that they may want to start on their own because you have to understand that independent schools run like a business, and they have a parent community to satisfy. They have overhead, etc. So it is possible. But I want to emphasize that none of the schools belonging to our National Alliance, and they are all registered, well-established schools, none of them will open until such time as the Minister has given us the go-ahead to do so. We certainly are not going to break any laws, and we're not going to encourage any independent school to open on the fly.
Let's talk about some of the measures that are being put in place, because ultimately for private schools, many would be able to provide for themselves in terms of the personal protective equipment that's required. Is that something that you're looking into doing in terms of trying to negotiate why you should be allowed to operate?
You see, there are two issues that we have to bear in mind. One is whether we could open earlier, and as I said earlier, the department has given us a set of protocols, including Government Gazette 479, which is issued by the Department of Labour, that sets out all the health requirements before any school could reopen, and the Department of Basic Education too has standard operating procedures and guidelines to schools which are very exhaustive, which require, for example, infrared thermometers and every child being provided with masks and sanitizing and social distancing to make sure that you don't have such large numbers on your campus, etc. So most of those requirements, I would think that a large percentage of our schools would be able to comply with. But there are schools that are subsidized, that are no-fee or very low-fee schools who are going to struggle because they haven't budgeted for this. And coupled with that is the fact that parents obviously are affected by the downturn and are not in a position in some cases to pay school fees. So that's an added burden on these schools that are struggling, the low-fee subsidized schools. In fact, we have approached government for financial assistance from whatever source, whether it's the Solidarity Fund or wherever. So again, as I pointed out earlier, there is a cross-section of independent schools. There are those schools, for example, which are run by private companies who may very well be in a position to abide by whatever the department requires, and they should be in a position to reopen. So that was the one issue. The one issue was about the health requirements and satisfying that. The other was the department's proposed phasing in plan, which initially spoke about bringing in the grade 7s and grade 12s, and then in a fortnightly interval bringing in other grades. So the independent school sector has asked for flexibility with regards to this, because we feel that it is possible for us to bring in other grades, not necessarily grade 7 and grade 12. And then also you have to understand that we have a very large number of ECD schools, the schools that cater for the pre-primary children, who are actually waiting in limbo because the department's plans are for those children to get back to school perhaps towards the end of July. So bearing all of these things in mind, our approach to the Department of Basic Education was to allow independent schools flexibility in terms of if we are in a position to satisfy all the health requirements that have been laid out, we should be allowed flexibility also in the grades that we will ask to come back to school, bearing in mind that, listen, this is a universal pandemic. It has affected the entire world, and we are fully aware of the medical legal issues. And I don't think any school is going to be foolhardy to bring in children unless they are absolutely satisfied that they can mitigate the health the problems that may arise.
Of course, one of the biggest challenges that you'd be facing is not just your ability to provide a safe environment for learners to come into, but it's also that on some level there needs to be uniformity when it comes to the education in the country and the curriculum that is being administered, even though we know that there are different curriculums in the public and private sectors. But do you foresee a situation where you think private schools may be allowed to continue with their curriculum across grades and finish, while those in the public sector may likely be set back by a couple of months?
So we are very, very sensitive about this. We understand. We don't want to be seen as elitist. I just want to also emphasize that all independent schools in the country are governed by the CAPS and the NSC curriculum, the National Curriculum Statements. And whatever the Department of Basic Education decides in terms of trimming the curriculum will also apply to us. So the long and the short answer is that we do not have a different curriculum. There are some schools that offer, for example, Cambridge or the International Baccalaureate, but they are comparatively few. There are very few such schools. Most of the other schools follow the state curriculum, and we will obviously be sensitive about how we handle our return to school. In as much as we feel we are in a position to return, we will be guided by the Department of Basic Education and the Minister, and we will be sensitive to the needs of education in the country as a whole. We do not want to be seen as standing in a position where we are considered to be advantaged in that sense.
Ebrahim Ansur is from the National Alliance of Independent Schools Associations.